Hello and welcome to another video. This video will cover how to form a debate case and the fundamental aspects that come into compiling your debate cases. This lesson will cover how to format an Aff case and then how to format a Neg case. Okay, so the first part is how to form an affirmative contention. And recalling back to our last video, which talked about how to format your cards or pieces of evidence, this slide will show you how to format those pieces of evidence in order to make an affirmative contention that is logical and persuasive. So again, it's usually 3 to 4 pieces of evidence. And the first part of an affirmative contention is also called the uniqueness. The uniqueness piece of evidence is really important because it says that the current situation, also known as the status quo or the squo, is bad. Because if you want to pass the resolution or the affirmative plan, you need to prove why the status quo is bad, because then there is an incentive to fix or amend the status quo. So this uniqueness claim will set up that right now things aren't looking that great. The second piece of evidence is the link evidence. The link evidence proves that doing the resolution or passing your policy proposal will lead to an X good thing. This is really important because if you don't have a link, it doesn't matter how good you think your resolution or maybe the plan is. If you don't have this piece of evidence, you're not going to be able to convey to your judge and to your opponent why doing the affirmative is such a good idea. And so you need the linked evidence. The third part is the internal link. The internal link is just another name for basically a chain in which you have to prove why the X good thing that occurs as a result of the resolution will lead to another good product. For example, if I say that compulsory voting ought to be passed in the United States and the link evidence is saying that compulsory voting leads to more democratic standards, the internal link will prove why democratic standards are good in the first place. Because the job of the internal link is to flesh out why the X good thing that the affirmative does is a good idea and why it causes another benefit. The fourth and last piece of evidence in your affirmative contention is the terminal impact. The terminal impact lays out the groundwork to what do we prevent that is beneficial to mankind. For example, why is preserving democratic value good? Because it prevents dictatorship and monarchy that leads to people's rights getting violated. This is an example of a terminal impact because it proves why do we care about your contention, why do we care about your policy proposal in the first place. And so another really good way to memorize these 4 pieces of evidence or these 4 parts is the acronym, ULIT. And while this may seem kind of cringe, it's a very good way to remember what the 4 parts of an affirmative contention is very quickly. So now that we discussed what the parts of an Aff case looks like, we now need to look at the parts of a negative contention. And the structure is very same, but the parts or the piece of evidence are just flipped because the negative is going against the affirmative. So once again, the first part is also called the uniqueness. Now, the uniqueness evidence in the negative case is different because it has to lay out the groundwork that why the status quo or current situation is good. The second part is also the link. The link sets up that the affirmative plan or policy proposal actually makes the status quo bad. These 2 pieces of evidence are really important to be able to win your negative contention in the debate. Because if you prove why the status quo is good, you have just proven why the affirmative isn't even needed in the first place. Because you have proven that right now things are fine. The second part is the link. The link proves why the affirmative just makes things exponentially worse. If you have these 2 pieces of evidence, your negative contention is going to be really strong. But in order for you to make it even stronger, you need the third part, which is the internal link. What does the affirmative make the status quo bad, or how does it make it worse into what does it cause in the long run. The internal link will also serve as a chain between the link and the impact, because it proves why the status quo causes another bad consequence. And now, in order to compete with the affirmative contentions, you need another terminal impact. This terminal impact is the ultimate harm of the affirmative. So this has to prove why passing the affirmative is so bad that it's going to cause more harm than good. So this is the basic of how a negative contention should look like. And for additional information, usually in an affirmative case, you probably want two affirmative contentions, completely separate things that you want to have in your Aff case. Because if your two contentions are basically saying the same thing, if the negative attacks one of them, both of them will fall. So you want to differentiate your contentions. And on the negative side, you probably want just one negative contention, maybe two, but one is probably the maximum, because you need time in order to answer your affirmatives case in the 7 minutes of the first negative constructive. But we will talk more about the speech structures and the speech times in our next video.